So whenever we talk about a material, we typically do not talk about one scenario like when the material was made, when it was prepared for production, when it was produced or anything like this. But it's typically that we want to see the full cycle. Yeah? So we typically want to have every aspect of the life of the material in view, because typically if we have a problem, it often happens somewhere when we have to repair something. And to repair a material and understand what the state is in, or for example, if we want to do a service on demand, we typically need to understand what happened beforehand. And that's including everything in principle of the whole life cycle of this material. So for example, if I have like a crack or anything like that in my material, I would like to know first of all, what's the product ID of that material, where that material is inside. With the product ID, I might be able to know how it was used, what's the use of that application, what's the load or the loading conditions on the material, and that could then be used in correlation with my product development, because the product developer, they had something in mind how they will use that material inside their application. And if I have that, then I can talk to the product developers, or at least get their data with the information, what kind of material did they put in there, why did they put it in there, what kind of performance did they expect to get from that material in their application, and then also how that material, when they got it, how it was put into production, what were the production steps, how was the material treated until it was in the application. And if we know that, then also we can talk to the people which develop the materials, because they kind of have material models, they have kind of ways of knowing if certain loading conditions are taking place, what that means to the material and how defects and degradation mechanisms are taking place during usage. And that would give us a real handle on what the state the material is in at that moment, when we need to know, do we need to do a service, or can we keep it running? Is the application safe, or what should we do in this case? And if we take all that into account, the problem often is that, first of all, we typically have not a conclusive and a continuous data collection, which then can be just retrieved easily. Typically, you have to go to different companies, you have to ask different experts. They have different views on the material, like a production guy will handle a material data in a different way than somebody who is designing the material. And if we continue through that life cycle backwards when we need it, it's very tedious and a very difficult task, because also the data formats are different, and maybe we don't even have the right to retrieve that data because it was a supplier or somebody who was just acting on behalf of somebody else, which didn't give me the data, just the part. And that finally brings back that point that if we don't consider producing something like an ontology, like a standard description of the material and standard data formats, it will be also in the future very difficult to handle such cases, and it will make the process of repairing things or letting them run for a longer time a tedious thing to do, and it will not enable us to, for example, look at more sustainable use of materials, because if I then go even one step further to, for example, recycling, we often talk about recycling in terms of we take the material, we mix it with other materials. For example, I take a steel of a door of a car and I mix it with the column which protects me, which has high strength steels in there, and therefore I get a less good steel at the end, while if I would have known that specific steels and alloys are in a specific location, I could retrieve them specifically and then only mix them. And that would give me maybe even the condition where I can do an upcycling. So I take the material and make something better out of it. And to really get to that point, we need to know about all the information inside that cycle and also be able to retrieve it at specific points. And as far as we know, it will be possible to come up with something like that if the reason why we do it will be known to everybody in that cycle.